What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Monday, August 27th, 2018, just getting to the end of the month, the Labor Day holiday and everything. And we have got a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in the control room, ready to answer the phone and put you on the air with your comments and questions and so forth and so on. Anyway, thanks for all the email people were sending on expressing concern about us. And it did look like it had the potential to be a serious storm. And Hurricane Lane basically brought record-setting rain to the Big Island and to Maui. There have been a lot of landslides on Maui. A giant sinkhole has opened up. But then the storm just kind of stalled in the middle of the archipelago. Just sat there churning and churning and churning until wind shear tore it apart. So we were very lucky here on Oahu. We had a few blackouts on Friday and things like that, but we didn't suffer any really major damage. In fact, the local people on Oahu are calling it Hurricane Lame. So we got through that one here. A lot of water, not much wallop here. And, of course, the second big story over the weekend, as you have all heard by now, Senator John McCain has passed away. He sort of telegraphed that was imminent when he announced he was going to stop receiving treatment for his brain cancer. So our condolences go out to his family. And there have been all kinds of responses. Of course, the corporate media is just tripping all over itself, trying to sing his praises and make it sound like this was the saintliest man ever to grace the halls of Congress. And then you have reality on the other side pushing back. All those former Vietnam veterans and POWs who know the truth about what McCain was really all about. And let us not forget the Keating 5 scandal that involved McCain as well. Now, interestingly enough, Lockheed Martin decided they were going to launch a Twitter tribute to John McCain. And they came up with this graphic and they put it on out there, basically saying, what a great guy he was. And certainly he was good for their business, no question. McCain never met a war he didn't like. But it triggered a Twitter storm of people just coming on up and saying, come on, we know what McCain was really all about. People talking about the allegations of the Forrestal incident, the Keating 5, as I've already mentioned. And so Lockheed Martin kind of stumbled on that. I think there's still a certain degree of naivete in the establishment where they still think that we, the American people, still buy all this stuff, that we believe what we're being told by the corporate media. And of course, more and more do not. Now, Donald Trump, of course, went out on Twitter and tweeted out his condolences, but failed to praise John McCain. And Fox News analyst Brit Hume basically chastised the president, saying that condolences are nice, but you have to say nice things about this guy. But you need to remember that McCain and Trump were never friends. They were definitely opponents, and they're both strong-willed men. Apparently, the White House American flag was being flown at full staff after McCain's death. That prompted an outcry, and now the White House flag is back at half staff. Now, the big question is, who's going to take over his seat? And Governor Doug Ducey in Arizona is looking at a short list, and apparently one of the names on that short list is Cindy McCain, John McCain's widow. Apparently she's under serious consideration by the governor. So we'll see what's going to happen there. But they're going to be running this thing about McCain all week long. All right, so let's talk about this mass shooting. Well, I'm not sure mass is the right word. There weren't that many people killed. But there was this video game tournament in Florida where they were playing this video game football, Madden 2019. And apparently this is a big thing where they go and compete and they share the games over Twitch. And apparently this one guy named David Katz lost. And people are saying he was very intense about what he was doing. He wasn't there to make friends. And last year he won the Bills Cup Series. So he's a major player. But apparently after he lost in this tournament, he opened fire on his fellow gamers and bystanders. And according to the police, 3 people, including the gunman, were killed and 11 more were wounded. And Katz's online profile was Bread or Ravens Champ. And obviously my question here is going to be, was this guy on prescription antidepressants? Because you just don't get that intense about a video game. And I know some people really do get intense about them. I don't do video games other than flight simulators. And all I do is just fly around and look at the scenery. That's the extent of my computer entertainment. But every time I see an unreasonable reaction, which certainly losing a video game and then shooting people is, in my book, an unreasonable reaction, I want to find out what medication this guy was on. That's what I want to know. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Turning over to the war zones. Over in Afghanistan, it is being reported that the head of Islamic State in Afghanistan has been killed in an airstrike. Apparently, Afghanistan is heating up. There's been a surge in suicide bombings, terror attacks in Kabul, mass kidnappings, and apparently it's showing a growing resurgence of both the Taliban and Islamic State after multiple failed attempts of the NATO-backed central government to strike ceasefire deals with the Taliban. Well, here's what's going on. That NATO-backed central government is an installed puppet regime. And the people of Afghanistan don't want it to be there. Now, more recently, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani survived what appeared to be an assassination attempt back on the 21st when a hail of shoulder-fired missiles landed near the presidential palace in Kabul's green zone, interrupting his televised speech. All right, let's take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, the shooting in Florida is just another symptom of a decadent society. I mean, I'm a gamer. I love my computer. I love my game consoles. But, I mean, this is just decadence. And also the society as a whole, which is decadence of not being able to handle anything just to go out and kill somebody else because you're angry. Kind of like what the liberals, neoliberalism is, like what they're doing in South Africa. And it's the same mentality.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's crazy. I mean, like, you can't even, in this country, go to a restaurant without being bullied, and you can't even go to a video game tournament without getting killed. You can't walk the streets of this cities in this country without getting shot. So something has gone wrong.
Our society is breaking apart.
I mean,
our society is breaking apart. You've got these groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter that are out there beating up people with different political points of view. You've got politicians like Maxine Waters encouraging them to do just that. And it's tearing the fabric of our society apart.
All right, Mike, as that being said, I got to switch gears. I know some people might be angry at what I said, but my condolences go to John McCain's victims, Mike. Because
I got a lot of emails saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah, this dude, and my condolences go to his first wife, too. This guy was not a good guy. He was a scumbag, okay? And the media can tell me he was a maverick. And then, Mike, you notice, if all the media agree, like Fox and CNN, MSNBC, he wasn't a good guy.
Yes.
Because, when they all agree, they're full of crap. But this guy was not a good guy. He brought a lot of death and destruction. And not only him, he's only part of a puzzle. He's a part of a larger group that just is garbage. So I'm not going to lose no sleep. And maybe he's burning in hell. I don't know. I don't care. I feel sorry for Cindy, his wife, and his kid. But, she is on The View, so she takes a lot of crap, and she gives a lot of crap, too. So you know where their family's at. you know. But but Mike, I'm going to switch gears because this is more important than that. Is what's going on in Syria, because there's something going on, because there's something coming, because Russia's sending our armada, and the U.S. Navy's got a couple I mean, you got that feeling there's another false flag coming real soon, like in the next 2 days.
Oh, the Russians are already saying that's going to happen. There's no question.
And this is a scary moment because, you know, you had that Russian politician says they should bring tactical nukes to Syria, which, you know, I'm against. You know, got to keep the tactical nukes out of that theater. But you know what, Mike? Like, I think it's coming to a point where this crap's not going to go on too much longer. I mean, how much more can this crap go on? You know what I mean? Like, but with the false flags and you cannot keep pushing this crap. Don't poke the bear too many more times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
all it's going to take is somebody making a mistake, and we'll be in a hot war. There's no question about it. I mean, the U.S. keeps goading Russia. Great Britain is goading Russia. And they're all playing brinksmanship here. And, you know, it's all about thumping chest and getting access to riches and so forth. And they're all waiting for the other side to back down. But I think Russia is not going to back down because of how close they came to losing Moscow in World War II. They don't want to be fighting World War III on the streets of Moscow. They want it to be fought as far away from their country as possible. And I think Trump and his war hawks are miscalculating here.
Especially when Michael Bolton, yeah, John Bolton is like advertising if they do this one more. He's basically telling them, like, what's coming. Do you realize that? Like, he is actually advertising what's coming. Like, if there's another false flag, we're going to respond. Well, you know what? I mean, Russia will not let Syria fall, and I don't think, Mike, some of your guests think, but they're not going to let Iran fall, because Iran is also a jump point with terrorism into the Caucasus. Yes. Iran's not going to fall, and Syria's not going to fall, and I'll put my life on that, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And again, a lot of people are talking about this. Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenkov says Great Britain is plotting a chemical attack in Syria to be blamed on Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian Arab Army. This will be used as a pretext for a direct attack on the Syrian government by the United States. And apparently, Konashenkov's remarks were quoted Saturday in TASS. There we are. And apparently, they've got solid intelligence that this is going to happen. And you know something? Again, a little bit of common sense. Why would Assad use chemical weapons right now? He's all but won the war. And he knows that's the one thing that would give the U.S. justification to come back on in and start meddling again, and Assad doesn't want that. Meanwhile, Russia has sent the largest naval armada of the Syrian war in response to reports of an imminent U.S. attack, and they have sent quite a few ships into the Mediterranean, including the Admiral Grigorovich, Admiral Essen-class frigate, and this is some heavy artillery, and supposedly they have deployed a great deal of warplanes as well, so that nobody will interfere, that's their word, when Syria goes in and cleans up Idlib. Now, over in global research, they're saying that what the U.S. may be trying to bring about is the reimposition of a no-fly zone in northern Syria. And I'll tell you right now, Russia will never go along with that. And neither will Syria. And so the U.S. will go on up there and say, we're going to shoot you down. Nope. We're getting so close to direct combat, conflict between us and Russia. That's a very, very dangerous place to be here. Meanwhile, if you remember the lesson of the Vietnam War, you cannot win a war just from the air. You've got to have boots on the ground. And right now, America's boots on the ground fighters in Syria are Kurds and Al-Qaeda. That's who they've got in there. Now, the U.S. is still out there demanding Russia has to leave and Iran has to leave. They've been invited in. They've got the permission of the Syrian government to be there. The U.S. does not. Apparently, several thousand militants, rather than sit there and wait for the Syrian Arab army to come down on them, are preparing for an offensive against the Syrian government forces. This is coming out of the Syrian Defense Ministry. And the ministry said the leader of the Tahrir al-Sham group has called on all militants in the Syrian northwestern province of Idlib to prepare for an offensive against the Syrian government forces. And several thousand militants with heavy weapons and armored vehicles are gathered for this offensive. Gee, I wonder where they got all those heavy weapons and those armored vehicles. There's been another little diplomatic tiff, if you will. Apparently, Russian aircraft were overflying the Black Sea, which Russia considers its zone of security. It's international waters, but they run security patrols here. And the Royal Air Force basically came on up with a couple of jets to, quote-unquote, escort them. In other words, to steer them where the British thought they should go. And the reason for that is they're saying that the plane was too close to NATO airspace in the Black Sea. Everyone's trying to change the map here. So the Russian embassy has basically protested to Great Britain and all this aerial chest thumping here. NATO, meanwhile, is starting to wonder who's calling the shots over there, because sometimes it seems like they're getting a little paranoid. Apparently, Greek media has reported Washington has stepped up its military activities in the Aegean Sea, which they claim is being turned into a U.S. training ground. Now, NATO has handed Athens a list of 50 what they call suspicious vessels it accuses of conducting reconnaissance missions in the Aegean Sea near the coast of Greece. Now, we're not talking military ships here. It's fishing boats, sailing boats, leisure ships. There's a lot of boats in that part of the world. And NATO's out there. They're all in cahoots. They're all spying on us. All right, let's take a phone call. Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. What's on my mind is I keep hearing reports about when Trump, when he first got into office, the document was put in front of him about changing the succession of the DOJ, or Department of Justice, from the Attorney General to the Deputy Attorney General and then to the Solicitor Attorney General. And supposedly now it's completely changed with this tricked document that they had him sign, calling it a housekeeping matter. Is there any way for him to put that back the way it was?
There is no succession in the Department of Justice. Attorney generals and deputy attorney generals can be hired and fired at the president's discretion. So I don't know where this story is coming from. But the reality is, you know, Trump does have the authority to fire these people and then replace them with whoever he wants. There's no automatic guarantee that if Sessions is fired, Rosenstein would become the Attorney General. In fact, I would say quite likely that is not going to happen under Trump's watch.
How deep of a firing does he need to do to get control of the Justice Department?
I'd have to look at an org chart, but I would imagine we're probably talking about at least a dozen people.
Wow. Well, that's all my questions that I had.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot, Kevin. We're going to let you go here. We've got a commercial break coming on up, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I'm looking at Almastar News, and they are reporting a breaking story that Syrian air defenses have been placed on highest alert all the way across the country. And apparently a source at the Miza Air Base said they have been ordered to make preparations for a possible attack directly on Damascus. So it may be that the U.S. just isn't even going to bother with a false flag. They're just going to say, hey, we're the United States of America, we're exceptional, we're great, and we're going to take out Bashar al-Assad. But that is very alarming, to put it lightly. Okay, now, as everybody gets ready to go into Idlib, and this coming attack on Damascus may be the U.S. way of saving what's left of their terrorist buddies still in Idlib, Moscow is lifting sanctions against Turkey as a bargaining chip ahead of Idlib. And basically, Russia's going to lift the visa restrictions for Turkish nationals holding official passports, and stated that a Russian-Turkish working group will discuss the issue of Russia easing the visa regime for Turkish citizens in late August, which is where we are right now. Over at the United Nations highest court, the International Court of Justice, Iran has filed a lawsuit against the United States over President Trump's decision to reimpose sanctions on the Islamic Republic after he unilaterally withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal. And according to Tehran, the policy conducted by Washington is nothing but naked economic aggression. And they went on to say that Iran will put up the strongest resistance to the U.S. economic strangulation by all peaceful means. Meanwhile, Mike Pompeo is saying that Iran's just filing of the lawsuit is an attempt to interfere with the sovereign rights of the U.S. because we have sovereign rights to go into other people's country and make a mess. By the way, apparently, when I saw this just before we went to airtime, Iran has announced it now has full control of the Straits of Hormuz and is saying the U.S. Navy does not belong there, which is technically correct. But the U.S. Navy has a bad habit, well, like the entire U.S. military, of simply going where they want. So we'll see what's happening there. Things are moving really, really, really fast. Up in Ukraine, they just had their Independence Day, and they had a big parade, the Independence Day parade. And apparently military personnel from 18 other countries took part in the parade, including American, British, and Canadian troops. That, too, is sending a message to Russia. Meanwhile, within the Ukraine army itself, apparently they have 50 brand new snipers who all speak Arabic. So, looks like the ceasefire is increasingly fragile. Okay. Let's talk about Cuba. Proving that it knows how to hold a grudge, the U.S. has had a blockade on Cuba for more than 60 years. And as a result, the tiny Caribbean island has lost a total of $134 billion in lost business over those 60 years. Now, the one thing that I really thought was a good idea under the Obama administration was they were saying, let's normalize relations. You know, let's get some Cuban rum and Cuban cigars over here. Let's get tourism going. And unfortunately, Donald Trump reversed that and just slammed the blockade back on. You know, whatever the blockade was being done for, the people who committed whatever offense, they're already dead. This is just the U.S. proving that it can bully any nation for as long as it wants to. It's another message to the rest of the world. We don't care how long it takes. We will just starve you to death. Alrighty, down in Israel, yes, on Friday they did have another demonstration at the fence between Israel and Gaza, and over 180 people were injured during these clashes with the Israeli soldiers. Now, not too long ago, the IDF shot this Norwegian activist in Kafr Kodum, and this was Matin Cohen, and the IDF's official response is, don't be ridiculous, we don't shoot women. And yet Kristen Foss has been shot twice, once in the abdomen and more recently again in the foot. Now, we did this little story of this artist, Mohammed Sabana, and he's a good artist, and he's out there just drawing artwork that speaks to the occupation and saying, it is an occupation. It's not a conflict. There is no war. It's just black and white. All right, so we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I was looking through that story we mentioned just before we went to the commercial break about apparently Syria is expecting a U.S. attack on Damascus itself, a decap strike. And is the U.S. going to stage a false flag attack of some kind and say, oh, we've got to get that evil Assad? But again, Assad has no reason to use chemical weapons. That part of the story never held up. So learn if you're being lied to, look for what should be there and isn't. And in all these past claimed chemical weapons attacks, what was supposed to be there but wasn't was a reason for Assad to do something that stupid. And the same holds true. He's all but won this war. And the U.S. is getting desperate because they don't want to admit they've lost this one. That'll pull the rug out from the rest of the war agenda. Anyway, getting on back down to Israel, the United Nations is warning of the collapse of critical life-saving services in Gaza as the emergency fuel runs out. And apparently, pardon me, the regular electric service is only running for between 2 and 4 hours a day. And hospitals in Gaza are reliant on backup generators to keep things going. Now, the United Nations has donated fuel to keep these services running, but it will be used up in the next few days unless emergency funding is secured. Okay, now this next story, I got to tell you, this makes me angry. This does make me angry. According to this report that is coming out of Global Research, the Trump regime is going to formally reject the Palestinians' right of return, which is something Netanyahu wanted worked into Trump's deal. And the Palestinians said no, they have a right of return. It's UN Resolution 194 said Palestinian refugees wishing to return to their home and live at peace with their neighbors should be permitted to do so at the earliest practicable date. This is back in 1948. And that compensation should be paid for the property of those choosing not to return and for loss of or damage to property which under principles of international law or equity should be made good by the governments or authorities responsible. So basically what's going on here, Trump is attempting to usurp the authority of the United Nations. And that's a very worrying degree of arrogance, I think. Meanwhile, the United States has issued another attack on the UN with plans to cut off funding to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the Human Rights Council, with other UN agencies being potential future targets. Basically, it's easy. If they're critical of Israel, nope, no more money. Don't get any more money. You said bad things about Israel. Well, look what Israel's doing. That doesn't matter. You're not allowed to say bad things about Israel. No more money for you. Over in North Korea, their media is accusing the United States government of double dealing after the cancellation of Mike Pompeo's trip, and even further saying they're hatching a criminal plot against Pyongyang. So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe just everybody says, well, we got to put North Korea on the back burner because now we're going into Syria and we're going into Iran. And Washington is still messing around in Nicaragua, trying to bring about a soft coup. They have been messing around with Nicaragua going all the way back to the 1980s and the Iran-Contra scandal. And what's interesting is that Americans who supported the Sandinistas back then are now supporting the Contras today. So they're flipping sides. It's just keeping them fighting each other. Okay, now a little bit of good news. As you know, the corporate media has just been pounding Russia, 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 Russia. Russia did this, Russia could do that, Russia's on the verge of being able to do whatever. Polls are showing it's not working. This is not like the Cold War, the 1950s and 1960s, where people naively trusted the corporate media. They know better now. And this propaganda to try and get us all to hate the Russians is just not getting a lot of traction. It's getting traction with people who don't know how to use computers. Certainly getting traction with people who make their money off the military-industrial complex. But that was basically it. So the propaganda just isn't working. We've been lied to so many times. We've been lied to so many times. Why would we ever trust anything this government or corporate media says ever again? Okay. Turning to the domestic political scene here, Rosenstein has now moved the Cohen case to New York and turned it over to attorneys in the Southern District. Now, Rosenstein did this to ensure that this witch hunt against Trump would continue even if President Trump shut down the junk Mueller investigation. They're making their contingency plans. How can we keep this going? Haaretz came out with a very interesting article, and it's in the form of a warning today to the American Jewish community. And it said, if Trump falls, the testimonies of Cohen, Pecker, and Weisselberg could spark an anti-Semitic backlash. I mean, I get all these emails saying, look, look at all these Jewish people who seem to be at the heart of this whole mechanism, and we don't want to be painting with a broad brush, but it is true. And now apparently Haaretz is acknowledging that, and acknowledging that the optics are not very good. Haaretz correspondent Chemi Shalev is saying that the trio's public profile is a Jewish stereotype. Now, last week, Cohen's attorney came on out insisting that Trump had advanced knowledge of the Russian hacking, which never existed anyway, but they're still trying to build on that lie, and that he'd gotten this information from Michael Cohen himself. Today he is backtracking, he's backpedaling, and he's saying that no, it's his instinct that Trump knew, but no direct knowledge. In other words, it was another lie and it got a lot of coverage. Always got to look for those retractions. Do you remember Anthony Weiner's laptop? And it was a big factor in this whole Hillary Clinton email investigation. And when it was opened up by New York Police Department in association with this sexting case, the New York police found tons and tons of State Department emails on the hard drive. And they basically threatened to go public with that, and that's what forced James Comey to reopen the investigation. And then he turned around and said, yeah, she's innocent, she didn't do anything wrong. And I remember at the time where they made the announcement that they had gone through all the emails on that laptop in just a matter of a few days. This is from the same people who insist it's going to take 77 years to process out Hillary Clinton's emails. But it turns on out that the FBI was lying, because apparently only 3,000 of the 694,000 emails were directly reviewed for classified or incriminating information. They just ignored what was on the laptop. There could be stuff there still. Now, this may be a little too late for Bernie Sanders, but apparently the Democratic National Committee is trying to repair its somewhat battered image for fairness and equality. And they've made the decision to strip the superdelegates of excess power. They're calling it an historic reform. And by the way, I've never heard of anything like a superdelegate in that Constitution. But the DNC's finally decided to limit the superdelegates' power to try and make the 2020 nomination process more fair. And that right there signals to me that Hillary may have decided not to run after all. But we'll see. It's a long time between here and 2020. Story coming on out from Investment Watch blog. Apparently this walkaway movement is really gaining steam. And a lot of Democrats are just leaving the party. And they're either becoming independents or libertarians or Republicans even. But it's apparently a huge movement, and it could significantly shift the voting come November. So I'm sure the Democrats are going to scream, we've got to have open borders, we have to have more illegal immigrants, we've got to get them registered to vote here. Turning to the economic news here, the latest batch of U.S. sanctions against Russia comes into effect as of today. And Moscow has already promised a proportional response. Now, the State Department document published by the Federal Register website on Monday outlines the new restrictions that Washington hopes will make Moscow more cooperative. In other words, we're going to go on beating you up economically until you do what we tell you. And these latest sanctions were imposed on the pretext of Russian involvement in the poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter in Great Britain back in March, which was pinned on Moscow even though nobody has been able to produce any evidence to back that up. Just take our word for it. We're the government. We're the media. We wouldn't lie to you. Ooh, how dare you even imply that we would lie to you? How dare you dare that we would lie to you? All right. And for every action, there's a reaction. And Russia officially announces they're going to get rid of the dollar. And this is clearly a retaliatory move to the growing list of sanctions placed on Russia. Meanwhile, over in Germany, their foreign minister has said Europe needs to deal with these sanctions targeting Russia, not to mention China and Turkey, because the sanctions, especially the Russian sanctions, are going to harm British companies that are currently partnered with Russia. And indeed, that's been happening already. So Trump is throwing around these sanctions, and it's hurting our allies. And along those same lines here over at Zero Hedge, Europe is working on an alternative to the SWIFT system in order to gain their financial independence from the U.S. And they're working on this independent European or Franco-German financing tool that would allow Europe to avoid being the collateral victims of U.S. extraterritorial sanctions. Now, this story over in Sputnik News basically makes the valid point. The U.S. facilitates creation of these SWIFT alternatives by pressuring Iran and these other countries. All of this stuff is happening. The de-dollarization, it's a reaction to the U.S. trying to throw its weight around with Federal Reserve notes. And somebody had to realize that that was going to be the inevitable outcome, that we were going to see that. Story, again, Sputnik News. What will happen if the Gulf states move away from the dollar, if they drop the petrodollar deal? Well, they'll have to do it all at once, because if they do it one at a time, they'll get invaded the way Iraq and Libya did. Now, the other day we were talking about how in Saudi Arabia, they were going to have this Aramco initial public offering. They were going to put about 5% of its national oil company on the stock market. And it was going to be $100 billion. It's a huge company, very profitable. And then all of a sudden, at the last second, it got yanked. And apparently, it's now come on out, according to Reuters, King Salman, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's father, basically stepped in to shelve the deal. Now, the IPO was the brainchild of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And so people are saying that the king felt that maybe that was a little too great an exercise of independence, and that he basically wanted to teach Crown Prince bin Salman a lesson here. Down in South Africa, the land reform is going on. And of course, it's based on this idea where there's a group of people here who believe they have a right to property owned by this other group of people over here. And under Ramaphosa, they don't have to prove it. They don't have to have a document. They just, this is my land. You know, God gave this land to me. It's mine. And there's an old adage that possession is 9/10 of the law. And the burden of proof rests squarely with the person attempting to alter and abolish present property titles. Unfortunately, Ramaphosa's government campaigned on this idea that white farms were going to be confiscated and divided up among the black population. And it looks like it's moving forward. All right. Remember Wonga, the payday loan giant, huge company? Then they got into trouble because Watchdog realized their payday loans were basically running at 5,000% interest, almost 6,000% per year because of the way it was being compounded. So now former customers are demanding compensation, and Wonga is on the brink of collapse. They may be about to disappear. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the war zones here. Fars News is reporting that over 40 children have been kidnapped by terrorists in northwestern Syria with the assumption that they are going to be used in this false flag chemical attack amid reports on terrorists' plot to launch a fake chemical assault in the region. So it looks like it's on, and they're rushing because they know that most of us, we're trying to talk some common sense into the American people. Like, why would Assad do something like this? So, yeah, it looks like the U.S. is going to go right back into Syria, and hopefully that's not going to bring us into direct conflict with Russia. But at some point, Russia's going to stop being accommodating. Okay, turning to immigration and refugees. Apparently on a beach in Spain, near a luxury hotel, tourists were just out there enjoying themselves, and all of a sudden one of these boats just, came up on the beach. It was just packed with migrants who got out of the boat and just literally climbed up a cliff to get into the interior. Apparently, there's an African migrant who has been arrested out in Italy for supposedly pushing a young teenager to her death off a cliff after it is thought he tried to rape her. So, thank you, George Soros, and your Open Borders initiative. That's worked out really well for people. Okay, so let's talk about the social media crackdown. And story that came on out from Zero Hedge. Is it going to get worse? Yeah, I would say so. At this point, it is very obvious, despite all of the claims coming out of Google, Twitter, Microsoft, Snapchat, and the other major social media companies. They're not being fair, they're not being balanced, they're not being even-handed. They're pushing the Democrats. And apparently last Friday, representatives from all these social media companies gathered to discuss strategy for the 2018 election. In other words, who gets blocked? It's dirty out there, what can I tell you? Now then, there's a document that got leaked out, 49-page document, that reveals that the man behind all of this social media censoring is none other than George Soros. And he's the world's wealthiest liberal political agitator. He loves exerting influence via his immense personal wealth at the grassroots level of many political struggles around the world. I think George Soros makes a convincing argument for socialism by showing how individuals with way too much money can cause a lot of harm. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And apparently over at Charter Spectrum, this huge, gigantic cable company that, at least where we live, does not actually deliver the bandwidth that they advertise. You'll remember that last year, the cable and broadband industry lobbied the government to kill off broadband privacy rules at the FCC. Now, the rules were fairly basic, requiring that ISPs and cable operators clearly disclose what data is being collected and sold, but also provide working opt-out tools for users who don't want to participate. Now, the rules also contain restrictions requiring that consumers opt into more sensitive data collection, as well as some requirements that ISPs and cable ops adhere to standard security procedures, which you think would make sense. However, BuzzFeed has now found a vulnerability on the Charter Communications Spectrum website and makes it possible for just about anyone to take over your account without a password. And according to the report, this flaw was discovered and involved tricking a Spectrum website that lets subscribers create a Time Warner cable ID, which is the company Charter just acquired, which you can do without a password. And it's a tangled, if a targeted customer hadn't yet registered for such an ID, a website flaw let a hacker trick the website into creating one by replacing their own IP address with the customer's using the X forwarded for technique, which is a relatively trivial affair. So, they're being very reckless about this. There was a story on Fox News just a little while ago where apparently now there's a big stink that colleges and universities are selling the data on students from their exams and their homework and their term papers. All right, let's take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, here, let me just make this lower. Spectrum website. Anyway, I just want to call and say what you said about Soros. That's this is an example of maybe why we might need socialism. Not only Soros, a bunch of these billionaires.
Yeah,
I agree. I've been telling other people. Yeah, I think we need to raise our taxes on the rich multiple times. I'd like to see a 90% income tax on anybody making over $1 billion. I mean, over $1 million. I'd like to see their their wealth taxed on top of it. These people don't need this much money. What it is doing is it's giving them too much power, too much influence, and they're influencing even more policies. And that reminds me about what you were saying about Syria. What is it? You said they're getting ready to another false flag, right? Another chemical false flag.
That's what the Russians are saying. That's what Fars News is saying.
Yeah, I believe.
And we've seen so many of these things over and over again. But, you know, if they're, for the U.S. government to sell a renewed war in Syria to the American people, they're going to have to do something that's really horrible and bloody, and I'm very concerned that these 40 children that FARS News says have been abducted for this false flag, they will not survive the incident.
Where were these false? I didn't even hear about the 40 children. Were they kidnapped by the terrorists?
In northwestern Syria, and it's presumed that they're going to be the little tiny bodies that will be splashed all over TV to get you to want to fling your children onto Bashar al-Assad's corpse or something like that.
But I just want to warn Donald Trump, and I don't really think I'm speaking for myself. You want our support, Mr. Trump. You better not get us into another war. You better not, because I'll tell you the truth. I won't even care whether you get impeached if you do, all right? Because you would deserve to be impeached if you let it get it. You better get control of bums like Bolton, Pompeo, and others, and you should fire them. But if you can't, at least, if you don't want to fire them, at least get control of them. Get them under your control. And if you don't, you're going to lose. And I also want to make, I've told you before that I'm of Jewish ancestry, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to say this to other Jews. I'm very concerned that if the Zionists and the Sheldon Adelson types who support the Zionists, if they get this vile creature there of a billionaire, you talk about Soros, he's another one,
yeah.
Adelson. If this vile creature gets us help push us into war, and the Zionists are behind it, you're going to cause anti-Semitism. And I have concerns because I love the United States of America. I don't have dual loyalty. My only loyalty is the United States. If I had to pick a second favorite country, it would be Russia. But still, the U.S. is still number one, and will always be number one, right?
Yep.
I don't want to have myself threatened and hated and whatever else, because you Zionist bums want to get us into more and more wars and do the bidding of Israel. I don't care about Israel. When Israel does something right, fine, just like any other country, great. When they do something wrong, hey, I got no use for you. When you kill innocent people, when you start wars with your neighbors, when you refuse to give back land that you stole, like to the Syrians, like the Golden Heights, I got no use for you. You're just another country to me, and not a good country either. Okay? I think Netanyahu is very similar to the guy in Erdogan in Turkey, maybe even worse. He's a troublemaker, and if the U.S. and Russia cooperated together, they would control clowns like this. If we had got to be over there in the first place, I don't think we should even be over there. Personally, it's up to me. All our troops would be withdrawn from every place, from the corners of the world, and brought home. Many of them I put on the borders to protect this country.
Or put to work, rebuilding our infrastructure. I mean, the Army Corps of Engineers is known for some excellent engineering works.
Yes, they sure do. They sure are. Okay, this is ridiculous. Russia spent $61 billion on their defense. That's because they're interested in defending Russia. They're not interested in projecting power around the world like the United States is overextending. They learned their lesson from the Soviet Union. They understand. They're interested in Russia. You could if you got to go to the doctor or something like that, you get everything is free except maybe for a couple of dollars. A couple of dollars you might have to spend. They have other things. They have I believe they have free education, free college, and all that. They take care of their people now. They're without being a communist, tyrannical nation. We don't. Okay? We're stuck in this war module. We're in this war mongering garbage. McCain was an example of a warmonger. I don't want to say anything too bad about the guy. He's dead now. All right? He's in God's hand. Let the God decide, judge him now. Okay? But let's be honest about it. On Earth, he did some horrible things, really horrible things. And I'm also very concerned about Trump starting to fall in with Lindsey Graham. I see Graham is now saying a session should be fired. But Graham is just playing up to Trump to get him to do his warmongering, neocon business. So that's all Graham is doing. Trump is surrounding himself with the wrong people. He's been doing this since he came in, and now he's surprised, how they're turning on him. You don't get your enemies, you don't bring your enemies in and think they're going to be your friends. not in government. That might work building a condominium or, resort hotel or whatever else you used to build. Okay? It's not going to help running the U.S. government because you've got some really vicious, limey, I don't even like to say swamp. I say sewer creatures running around who mean this country no good. And they're not only in government, but like I said, these billionaires who have way too much power and influence on our government. Whether it's Soros, Adelson, the Koch brothers,
Gates,
and others. That's the problem. Who else?
Bill Gates.
Oh, Gates, absolutely. Bill Gates, Zuckerberg, another one. With these tech companies, another thing he's got to do. Get your butt together and bring antitrust action against these tech companies. Break them up. They're too big, too powerful, too much influence. It was never meant, the Founding Fathers never meant for anything like this. The Founding Fathers were never in love with capitalism. I don't even think they ever mentioned capitalism in the Constitution. And as far as I know, there was no communism or socialism at the time. There's no guarantee. You don't have a right necessarily to become a billionaire under the Constitution. You have a right to free speech. You have a right to the Second Amendment to defend yourself. You have a right to not be snooped on by government. You have a right to be justly, if you're going to be accused of anything, you have a right to justice. You're right to a lot of things, but you don't have a right necessarily to be a billionaire. And this nonsense that a corporation is a person. Corporation is not a person. Corporation should have the right to the person, and they shouldn't have a right to give money to these politicians because that's all that is a bribe. That's all it is. That's not all I want to say, man. I hope, but I hope people get, I don't know how many people hear me what I'm saying. I try to say the same thing on Facebook, but, as long as I'm speaking on Facebook, I only use it as a agent. That's all I'm using it. I'm using it against themselves because I know they don't want stuff. I try to share everything I can. I share your stuff. I share Alex Jones' stuff. I share everybody. John B. Wells, you name it. I share everything I possibly can on Facebook and Twitter. I know they don't like it, but so far they haven't kicked me off. I've been censored a couple of times, but that's it. So that's about it, Mike. I hope we get our stuff together. I really do.
I sure do too. I mean, we just seem to be on this headlong rush into war. And it's a case of when's the starting time? Is the only open question. All right, so Mark, we're going to let you go.
Mike, one other thing. I just want to let my Jewish friends know. I don't know if there's any other Jews who listen to you, okay? But I just want them to know, if they're on, to look at some of the comment sections. Look at what's beneath the surface. Look at the real anti-Semitism. I'm not just talking about anti-Zionism, anti-Jew type of stuff that you'll find on the comment section. And understand, and it's all because of this warlike garbage and the neocons putting, not only neocons, the Zionists putting Israel ahead of the United States and getting us into war. That's why. Not because Jews killed Christ or any other reason like that, It's because of stuff like that. And I just want people to know. I hope people understand. Because I'm concerned. I'm very worried about it. Because I love this country. And that's about it, Mike.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the program, even Haaretz is saying the optics don't look good, that everybody is watching what is being done, and it's reinforcing some stereotypes, especially those involving, controlling the government, controlling other people. All right, so Mark, we're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates just rejoining the network, and by golly, I hate it when I'm right all the time. It is now being reported on Fox News that David Katz of Baltimore, the man who basically shot up this video game get-together in Florida, had a history of mental illness. He was hospitalized twice in psychiatric facilities and was prescribed antipsychotic and antidepressant medications. So there it is. There it is. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones now. John in Phoenix, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, nothing much. I'm being forced to take antipsychotics, by the way, and they make me a little crazy. I'm not out to shoot anybody or anything, but sometimes they make me a little bit wacky. But anyway, I was just going to the point. John McCain's been my senator for, since 5 years before I was old enough to vote. And I've been doing a lot of reflecting. And one thing I'm a little saddened by is that Henry Kissinger didn't go first, because after all, he gave John McCain the orders to carry out those bombings. And I'm not in the military, ever been in the military, so I don't know what it's like to have to take orders like that. So I hope you and Claire are holding up well, though.
We're doing fine here. This morning I cleaned up the last of the debris and, put all the emergency equipment back where it's stored. And so now we're just working on cleaning up the place. But thank you for your concern.
All right, take care, bud.
All right, thanks an awful lot. The phone lines are now clear, 800-313-9443. So getting on back to this computer stuff here, there has been a bit of a debate breaking out between Google and this hit game called Fortnite. And apparently, Friday, Google made public that hackers could hijack the game's installation software to load malware. Now, the installer is needed because Epic Games has bypassed Google's App Store to avoid giving it a cut of sales. A little too much greed there. And now the head of the company, Epic Games, is very unhappy that Google has made this public because people are starting to avoid the app now. Well, they should. We have an epidemic problem with malware. Oh, by the way, Amazon apparently has hired an army of people to say nice things about Amazon on Twitter. And it's a dead giveaway on just how big its reputation problem has become. We might be seeing the collapse of American confidence in our entire society. Facebook's in trouble. People don't trust it anymore. People aren't trusting the food companies. People aren't trusting anything. This is a big collapse in credibility and confidence. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Frank in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I think I heard just yesterday somewhere, the statistic, or someone that worked in the school system here said to watch your children because the leading cause of death, 10 and over, in our schools of our students is suicide. So I think that tells you a little bit of outlook on people's view of our society, whether they know it or not. Happy John McCain is dead week. And I really agree with people that say that we should build some type of tribute or memorial to the tumor that killed John McCain. I would donate some money to that. I don't have any freaking tolerance for disgusting people like he is. Total criminal. They're lionizing the guy. It's like, that's one thing everybody can agree on. When there's a criminal that dies, all of our people, all of our politicians can come together and talk about what a great guy he was. It's just amazing. I had on this Florida shooter. I understand that he was a big Hillary Clinton supporter and a big hardcore leftist anti-Trumper.
I didn't hear that. I haven't seen that yet. All I've gotten so far is a confirmation that he was in fact taking antidepressants.
Okay, well that's always my first question. Were they on antidepressants? The third thing, are you familiar at all with this publication? I'm not. I've heard it. I think it's called True Pundit or something like that.
Yeah. We've sort of waved at each other as we cross in cyberspace.
Okay, well, I just came across this earlier on another radio show, and I wanted to get it out. They're saying that some investigative inquiry turned up some credit application or something of Stephen Paddock's girlfriend.
Yes.
And that she was once on the payroll of the FBI. Have you heard that?
Yeah, we were going to report on it a little bit later in the show. And apparently,
great. Also,
the FBI is not actually denying it, but they're obviously in a bit of a scramble.
Yeah, it's like the dark FBI. The lower level FBI guys are like, what? We don't understand that. We can't find this, but they're not denying it. Also, I recently spoke with someone who was in the crowd in the Las Vegas shooting, and I'm just going to go ahead and get it out there. I don't know if this person's lying to me or not. Maybe they're part of it. He and his wife were there in the crowd with the shots ringing everywhere. He claims that people were dying. He said people were falling dead and shot and blood everywhere, all over the place, that he was actually trying to help some people. He said, though, veering away from the official narrative, he said the shooters were actually amongst them. He said there were shooters all around them. It wasn't.
I've heard that. I've heard that from other people as well. Anyway, listen, Frank, got to let you go. Got to do a break for commercials. Got a bunch of people waiting on the phone line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, we're standing here with our hands outstretched. We need your help to stay on the air. We need your help to keep the equipment running. And if you can help, every little tiny bit is appreciated. The postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And the phone number to call in with a credit or debit card donation or to pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1. Okay, let's go back to our phones, and we're going to start with Peter in Dallas. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Yeah, I think you're great, and I usually only call up when I have a problem with something you said, and I kind of add them up over time. But so a few things I just want to mention. I think you can do better. I think when we talk about capitalism, we have to be more specific. There's a big difference between capitalism and an honest money system and capitalism and a fiat money system. And I think sometimes we talk about capitalism. I think we need to be more specific. Next thing is, the previous caller said he had problems with people being billionaires. And again, there's a distinction between a billionaire who's created a tremendous amount of wealth for the community and a billionaire who's gotten all this money but hasn't created any wealth to share with the community. And the last thing is, a lot of times you and other people say things like that the Fed creates money out of thin air. That is true, but I think a better statement would be that the Fed creates loans out of thin air. They have to pay those loans back, but they don't really. But it's not like we
have to pay them back. The Fed doesn't pay them back. We pay them back. There's kind of a double shuffle going on here, where the U.S. Treasury will issue a Treasury bond, send it over to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve will create the equivalent volume of currency to match that Treasury bond. And then loan it into circulation or send it wherever else it's going to go. The problem is that Treasury bond represents a promise by the government to tax the American people, to take away their money without giving them anything back for it in order to make good on the Treasury bond. And it is a scam, and many people throughout history have said this is such a scam for the bankers, because if the U.S. government can print a Treasury bond, then they can print a dollar bill. And the difference is that one benefits the country and the other one benefits the big banks.
Well, let me correct myself then. Let me just say, at the local level, if a bank creates a loan for $500,000 to lend it to someone, so they create that money out of thin air, but they lend it to someone, and the money supply expands by $500 million or $500,000, whatever what it was. But when that person pays back that loan to the bank gets to keep the interest, but they have to close out that loan. They don't get to keep the $500,000. The bank, the local bank, they just get to keep the interest on that. So I'm not saying that's a good system, but it's not quite the same as saying they just created it out of thin air. They created a loan out of thin air, and they have to close that loan out. But the Fed thing is, yeah, I'm not there with you. You're much more controlled than I am.
Okay.
But thank you very much. But thanks a lot for listening to me.
All right, well, thank you very much for the call and the ideas. I'm going to switch over to Jesse in Houston. Aloha, Jesse. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I've been calling for, past a little bit. I think this is my third time calling. I was going to talk about immigration, but I'm actually in the hospital. I had a colostomy.
Ouch.
Yeah. I had diverticulitis, which wouldn't go away, which caused, 6 to 7 inches of my intestine to basically just die. And I was rushed into the hospital, and they cut a big old piece of it off. And they put me in a bag. So I was listening to the radio show, and I thought I'd call.
What is it that you wanted to talk about today?
I was watching the news, and I was hearing y'all talk about the McCain thing. How he died, and all of a sudden he's this angel. And it was like CNN. They have 2 specials that came out yesterday, just glorifying the guy like if he had never did anything bad in his life.
Yep.
And they had a guy sitting next to him, saying about how they were best friends, and then McCain started crying and stuff. I'm like, wow, this is just ridiculous. I mean, it's almost like, in Venezuela where the guy, they say once your politicians go up on stage and start singing and, basically talking good about themselves, that you're in trouble. I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
Well, yeah, this is expected behavior from the corporate media and a government that is obsessed with their image, and they want everybody to look good, no matter how ridiculous that may be, like when Maxine Waters gets out and says violence against conservatives is okay. But again, those of us who know McCain's real history understand what a crock the corporate media coverage has been. Anyway, listen, Jesse, going to let you go. Back with another caller after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to take a phone call from Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Goons and trolls, Michael. I just want to, normally I would address this with you just personally, but since we have some goons and trolls out there, I think I'd like to set the record straight on a little email you sent over to me. And that's exactly what you've got here, a troll or a goon by the name of Heather Oxtott, which I think that's a phony name. I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
But I just want to be I'm a stand-up guy, and I think you know I am. We've had a lot of conversations through email, and I respect 100% what you bring to the table to this network. This network is around because of you. I acknowledge that. If we have differences of opinion, it's because we have differences in experiences, and that is very much welcome. I have no problem. That's what's great about RBN.
Yes.
We have different experiences, which lead us to different opinions. And I just want to set the record straight that I think this is nothing more than a ploy to cause some disruption in the network.
Yes.
Somebody who appears to be a loyalist to you coming in.
Happen where somebody will come on in and say, oh, it was my first assumption that this email was sent to try and cause a disruption, which is why I didn't erupt or get upset. I just forwarded it to you, and I said, I think, this is what's going on here.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly what's going on here. And it's funny that I'm reading it now, and one of the callers used the N-word. And evidently I should have barked and screamed really loud at him, but I spoke to him as like I would a kindergarten child to say that is not a term we use here and respect here. This is definitely troll work, trying to cause some trouble between hosts and the network. And I just want to let you know, heads up, you know where I am. I've talked to you a lot on email, yep. And I respect what you bring to this table. I really do. And we may disagree on some things. Like I said, we have different experiences, which lead us to different opinions, and that is respected on this network as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely, absolutely here. And it's not just trying to cause friction between the different hosts and everything. We're starting to see more and more phone calls that are intending to basically just shake the show up and cause disruption. We just have to be very careful about that, that we stay in control of our program and not let the troublemakers come on in and do things that would offend our audience.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Stay on point, and that's what I've been doing when I talk about issues. This person definitely has an agenda. I can read through it. It's an agenda.
Yep.
That's it. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Great show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. One question. With the situation that's about to happen in Syria, primarily Damascus, do you think this could be wag the dog?
I don't know what they would be wagging the dog away from. I mean, it's no secret that the U.S. government's been trying to get Assad out of there for like 7 years. And if you want to talk about wag the dog, it's all this media obsession with John McCain. They're not reporting on any of this other stuff.
Right. Well, the reason I mentioned that, considering last week, Donald Trump was almost cornered due to his friends ranting on him and running to the feds. This is what I mean by wagging a dog.
Well, you mean, is Trump going to use the military action to distract the media from his legal troubles?
Yeah,
just like not be the smartest thing to do. Now that Cohen's lawyer has had to backpedal and say that no, he doesn't actually know for a fact that Trump knew about the Russian hacking. That was just his instinct. Well, that's as good as saying I lied, and Trump needs to get that stuff out there.
Right. Okay, well, I was just curious, and also the fact that you do have John Bolton over there. God only knows what he's doing.
Yes.
So, okay, Michael, thank you very much.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are now open again. So let's, okay, they're now talking about Jacksonville. All right, so that caller we had like 3 callers ago is talking about how Marilu Danley, who is Stephen Paddock's girlfriend, or was, basically on a credit card application listed the FBI as her employer. Now, this is the same Marilu Danley whose fingerprints were found on the ammunition used to murder 58 people on the 1st of October, just about a year ago. The same Marilu Danley who admitted to law enforcement that she helped Paddock load the magazines that he would use that night. Or at least that was what her story was. Now, this is the same Marilu Danley who was reportedly visiting family in the Philippines at the time. So more and more, it's looking like the entire story is suspect. And it's another FBI operation. Okay, did Dave in Missouri call on back? Let's put him on the air. Dave, are you there?
Hey, yes, sir. Howdy, Mike. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing fine. And what's on your mind today?
Well, I have to agree with everybody that I've heard so far. It's going to be hard to sift through your audience and find many John McCain fans. And, it kind of blows my mind. My mother actually passed away from brain cancer. And in hindsight, then she was undiagnosed. I mean, we had to make the decision on the table. She just fell over, weirdly enough, in the hospital, having breakfast with her sister. And they flew her to where I was in Springfield and showed us a scan of her brain and just big black blotches everywhere. And when you look back at it, even though, we didn't diagnose it, she just wouldn't go to the doctor. We thought she had lung trouble. But as you look back on it, she would get lost in conversations. She would glass over. And this was not my mother. I mean, my mother was always very attentive. And looking back, you can see that the effect that it had on her brain. So how you, senator, die in office with brain cancer, casting votes like McCain was to completely upset the party, and slap Trump in the face. Plus, a lot of us who really thought, who really want these reforms to continue, while we voted for this man. And so, but here he is, a U.S. senator, gets to die in office with brain cancer, obviously a debilitating disease, obviously going to affect his thinking. It kind of boggles the mind how that can happen, how there's no check and balance for the insane people who just will never leave, which, you got to put action to water. I worry about a lot of these people's mental health. But, I don't think you're going to find many fans
many McCain fans in your audience, and that's because everybody's informed. I do want to kind of bring up something that I can't track down, but I heard this reported that Trump is actually considering declassifying Hillary's emails. Now, have you heard anything about that? I can't nail that down.
No, I haven't. But all of Hillary's emails that do not contain classified information should already be declassified. The problem is prying them out of the FBI and the Department of Justice.
And, it made me think about, what made me think about that is you brought up Wiener's laptop. Don't you wish to get access to that? How does he have State Department's emails and secrets? Well, that's simple.
Well,
because
he shared that laptop with his wife, Huma Abedin.
Sure. And then it makes you think about, the kid got killed. His name just slipped me. His laptop, that has the WikiLeaks traces on it. You know who I'm talking about.
Seth Rich.
A kid who got yeah, that's it. His name just escaped me. And and so much of this evidence is hidden from the people who need to make informed decisions by the so-called authorities who you have to question their loyalty or at least come on now, what's your end game here? And I do want to throw a shout out to Steve Elkins. What a fabulous guy! I mean, he just comes across like a great guy.
Yes.
Shout out to Jesse in the hospital, brother. I hope you get feeling better. And I want to say a quick word to Francis, who responded to one of my phone calls earlier in the week or last week when I called Hillary a demon witch, and she said, "Well, witches wouldn't claim her." I get that. My wife is an earth witch. She considers herself Wiccan, but not in any evil way. So I do recognize there are both good and bad.
Yes.
But Francis kind of wanted to act like there was no such thing as a bad witch, an evil witch. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. That's not the case. And Hillary does serve a dark power and has a very dark force within her, which is the only term that comes to mind when you're trying to describe it. So, maybe I didn't use proper maybe it wasn't exactly the right way to say it, but how do you describe somebody that is that black in the soul, that evil, as Hillary Clinton? I mean, so you can only really use so many words. And there was something else I was going to say, but instead, go ahead, brother.
I was going to say the word that I used to describe her is sociopathic. Total sociopath.
Good one.
No empathy for anybody but herself, totally focused on herself, and they could be very, very dangerous people.
And it's always been that way. When I met her in the Walmart General Office in '87, she come across the table at me, and I seen something inside of her. Now, I'm 6'4". That little woman scared me to death, and I didn't even know who she was at the time. Turns out she was a Walmart board member and the First Lady of Arkansas. I didn't know any of that until like a month later. But just her absolute entitled. I mean, the evil of it. There is a pulsating, pounding, large evil, and I don't know what name you want to put on it. But it's present in the woman. And hey, by the way, I haven't heard you speak about Claire's health, so I'm going to go ahead and hang up. And if you could just kind of let us know how the girl is doing. A lot of us out here are still praying for y'all. And I kind of want a word about the hurricane. Did you get affected?
No, I started the show today mentioning the hurricane did a lot of harm on the Big Island and on Maui. But then it just sort of stalled in the middle of the archipelago and rained itself out. We had some blackouts and wind on Friday, and actually Saturday and Sunday we're pretty low key, and we're just now cleaning up the rest of the debris, putting away the emergency equipment. So we'll be ready for the next one. As far as Claire is concerned, she is getting better, slowly. She's very impatient about it. She has good days and she has bad days. But she's able to do her music, and she's not allowed to do housework yet. So we're waiting for the next meeting with the orthopedist to start really looking at that one vertebra that is the cause of so much pain.
Well, I'm sure sorry she's suffering. Tell her that we're out here praying for her, and we love you all very much. Folks, please support RBN. Peace out, brother.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call, and the phone lines are open again. All right, now, as you know, over the last decade, we have seen the police in this country become militarized, where the ordinary street cop seems to be going away, and all we're seeing are these SWAT teams. And they were being sold to us on this idea, we're keeping the public safer. But a new study published by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences just the 20th of this month is saying that the militarization of law enforcement in the United States does not make communities safer, nor does it enhance officer safety. In fact, they're saying the U.S. public is less safe under the militarized police because of the growing tendency for the police to shoot first rather than try and de-escalate the situation. Alrighty, Justin in New Jersey called back in, and normally we only allow one call per caller per day, but I understand you want to respond to Dave.
Oh, yeah, Dave. I said, Dave, don't compare your mother to John McCain, because John McCain didn't have brain cancer when his father was Admiral McCain, who covered up the USS Liberty, you know? Because I love Dave. He's a great guy, and he knows what he's talking about. But John McCain was just garbage. The guy did all these stunts. He got shot down because he wasn't following protocol. He flew under in Italy, knocked the power line. This guy was just a reckless person.
Yes.
And he didn't have brain cancer back in the day, Mike. So I mean,
he didn't.
So he was not a good guy. He thought he had, Mike, I think he had privilege.
Yes.
I know that liberals say you got privilege. No, he had privilege.
Yes.
Because he thought he was above the law, I think.
Well, certainly within the Navy, having a four-star admiral for a father tends to keep you immune from things. And, of course, those people who talk about the Forrestal incident are saying John McCain was airlifted off that carrier before any of the wounded were evacuated. So
only him, Mike. Only him was airlifted because he was a wet start Johnny. That's a fact. He wet started kerosene off his A6 Intruder, I believe, and it ignited a Zuni missile hanging off of another A6, off of a Phantom, F-4 Phantom behind him, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's what ignited the fire, and he got airlifted because his father was Admiral McCain.
Well, he got airlifted because the deck crew wanted to kill him, and the captain of the carrier said, we got to get him off here and get him to safety. That's why he was evacuated so quickly. Everybody knew what had happened. They've been warning him for months about these wet starts. And for those who don't understand the term, a wet start is when you're spinning up your jet engine, and you're supposed to put the fuel and the ignition on pretty much at the same time to get the engine going. McCain would let the fuel run for a little bit and actually build up in the engine. Then he'd hit that ignition, and it would blow this big ball of fire out the back of his airplane, make a huge whoomp. And he loved really doing that, mostly because of the look on the face of the pilot right behind him. But it is a very hot bit of burning kerosene, and it did touch off a Zuni missile.
And it ignited, Mike, the Forester. How many people died? Like 100? 80? 50?
Yeah, 180.
Yeah, but Mike, they sold the Forester for a penny from a Texas recycling yard. That's all I got to say, Mike.
All right, well, we'll let you go here, and we got another caller waiting on the line. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and let me turn this up just a little bit. So I'm getting complaints that my YouTube channel is there. That should be a lot better. Okay, so let's go back to the phones here. To Paul in New Jersey. Aloha, Paul. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, concerning John McCain, for one, I'm willing to forgive anybody in their youth and because of youthful indiscretion. So the mistakes he made in the Navy, and even if he was a songbird at the Hanoi Hilton and was being tortured by the Vietnamese, I would forgive them for that in a second.
Well, if Richard Nixon hadn't signed a blanket pardon for all the returned POWs, John McCain would have been up on treason charges. That doesn't sound like a youthful indiscretion to me.
Well, I just see myself in the situation of being tortured or anybody being tortured, and I always believe if they're being tortured, just give them the information. There's no information really that's that vital that you shouldn't just give to the enemy. And by the way, that's part of the reason why a good general doesn't give too much information to the soldiers.
Yes.
Knowing that if they are captured, the information could actually be disinformation. You don't want to inform them too well. Now, but that's not the problem concerning John McCain for me. You see, it's what he did later in life where I have a real big problem with him, where he was a lot older.
Yep.
He should have known better, especially about 5 years ago in 2013 when he was bragging about going to Syria, where he's pictured with Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, and almost being very flippant and putting down Ron Paul when they were critical of arming the Free Syrian Army, because it was pretty evident that the weapons we gave to the Free Syrian Army, that those weapons were promptly handed off to ISIS.
Yes.
And John McCain seemed to almost gloat about how he knew he'd been to Syria, he met with the leaders of the opposition, and alluding to kind of, circumlocution around the fact that I think he knew he was dealing indirectly with ISIS. And even if he wasn't and was dealing with the Free Syrian Army, why would he be so proud about causing a rebellion in the nation of Syria unless he was just, a total pathetic Zionist lapdog?
Well, that was the agenda, a regime change. I mean, the U.S. has done it at least 50 times to other countries since the end of World War II, or they've attempted it. They've attempted it, but they're only batting 500.
Yeah, and so John McCain, he would love trying to topple the Ukrainian government and the Maidan, coup. He loves the Iraq War I, Iraq War II. There's no war he was ever against. There was no arms sale he was never against.
Well, you're absolutely correct.
For violence.
Anyway, Paul, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, do you remember that compound they found in New Mexico where the kids were being kept? One of them apparently died there from medical neglect, wasn't getting his medication. And they were finding that these kids were literally being trained how to shoot schools up. Well, now, apparently somebody was able to get in there and acquire some of the materials from this compound before it was bulldozed at the order of a judge, because they found a document. It's a terror attack manual targeting a hospital in Atlanta. So there was something going on here. And what's really interesting is, again, we find out the FBI knew these people were there, and they weren't doing anything about it. Remember Cliven Bundy? All that the government put him through. Well, he's refiled a lawsuit against Nevada and Clark County governments. And the previous lawsuit, which was filed back in January, was thrown out after Bundy and his lawyers failed to take action in the case. Now, this suit claims that former President Barack Obama's late 2016 establishment of Gold Butte National Monument, which occurred while the rancher was in federal custody, was as illegal as it is unlawful and would preclude him from continuing to function on his land and destroy his livelihood. So in the latest version of the complaint filed this week, Bundy's lawyers are listed as Larry Klayman, go Larry, along with Las Vegas attorney Craig Mueller, who ran an unsuccessful bid for Nevada Attorney General in the Republican primary. So they're going to go back to court here and basically challenge this idea that a president can just willy-nilly declare a national monument and harm people's livelihoods. All right. Now, do you remember the Flint water crisis? And apparently, the Michigan Health Director, Nick Lyon, has been remanded for a manslaughter trial. He's the highest-ranking official charged for the Flint water issues. And he's being charged with involuntary manslaughter, meaning they acknowledged that he didn't know death was going to result from the decisions made about the Flint, Michigan water system. But apparently the health director and 4 additional people have been charged with involuntary manslaughter over the Flint water. And the case is being overseen by Genesee District Judge David Coggins. And he's determined there was probable cause that Lyon committed involuntary manslaughter against Robert Skidmore and John Snyder in 2015. And these 2 men died during an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease, which researchers have connected to the devastating use of improperly treated water in Flint, Michigan, starting in 2014. Well, I'm good. I'm glad they're holding these officials to account when they make bad decisions or decisions that are motivated solely by monetary considerations. And we already have another one of these things brewing out in Kansas, where apparently the water in the Wichita area has been contaminated. And the Kansas government didn't tell anybody in Wichita for 6 years. And apparently there were warning signs that the water was contaminated, but nothing was done here. So in 2011, while investigating the possible expansion of a quick shop, the state discovered dry cleaning chemicals had contaminated the groundwater on West Grand in Hayesville. And they didn't act for more than 6 years. It didn't test private wells less than a mile away, nor did it notify residents that their drinking wells could be contaminated with dry cleaning chemicals known as perchloroethylene, so they could test the water themselves. That is just flat out irresponsible. That is just flat out irresponsible. Anyway. Yesterday was the start of the annual Burning Man Festival. And this year it's a little different because apparently the police, federal officers, Bureau of Indian Affairs officers in the tiny town of Nixon, which is one of the last stops on the path to get there, to access Black Rock Desert, they're pulling cars over on flimsy or manufactured pretexts like dim license plate lights, and then asked to conduct a search. And if drivers refuse, canine dogs are brought to the site and made to alert on the cars, which give the officers a pretext to conduct a search. Now, that is certainly, I think, going to take the spirit out of the Burning Man Festival, which is just this incredibly wild free-for-all. It's a celebration of art and music. So, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, I've never been to the Burning Man Festival myself. I'd love to go sometime. It's not high on the bucket list, but it's on there. But I do remember all the years I worked for the Renaissance Pleasure Fair in Southern California, both as, in acting roles and then later on as a stage manager. And it was very cool, especially at night when the customers would leave and the place would shut down. It would really feel like you were living back in the Renaissance. So I have good memories of that. All right, let's talk about glyphosate. Apparently, following this glyphosate lawsuit, General Mills is now removing the 100% natural label from Nature Valley granola bars. Just decided they weren't going to go there. Article from Waking Times, and this one I think is probably on page 2 or 3 of the main site. And it's talking about a list of products and foods that have tested positive for Monsanto's carcinogen glyphosate. And here is the point of the article. This chemical has become so prevalent in our environment. Trace amounts are showing up in all kinds of places you wouldn't even think represented a problem. And so these products have been tested, and let's see. This is from, as I said, it's Weekend Times. And the foods are, I'm just going to give you a few examples here. Original Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios, Trix, Kellogg's Corn Flakes, Annie's gluten-free bunny cookies, Cheez-It Original, Doritos Cool Ranch. I mean, it's a long, long list here. And those were tested by the Detox Project, and then over at the Environmental Working Group, they did more testing. Nature's Path Organic Honey Almond Granola, Giant Instant Oatmeal, and Moms Across America was testing orange juice. And Tropicana, Minute Maid, Stater Brothers, Signature Farms, and Kirkland all have glyphosate in them. This one was a disappointment to me. Ben and Jerry's ice creams. Now, Ben and Jerry's is saying they were unaware of this. It is a microscopic amount, and they're working very hard to clean up just where in their supply chain this is coming from. So you don't have to give up your Americone dream here. Friends of the Earth Europe, they're finding soybeans, soybean fodder, cottonseed, sorghum, barley straw, lentils, sweet corn, sugar beet. It's just all over the place here. And here's where it gets weird. There's glyphosate being found sprayed onto women's feminine hygiene products. Why on earth would they do that? A probable human carcinogen. Apparently, certain vaccines contain glyphosate. And it's just permeated through the environment. Mercola back in 2014 reported human breast milk tested positive for glyphosate. Human urine samples have tested positive. Rainwater samples, groundwater supplies. It's everywhere. Monsanto has just, for the sake of a fast buck, soaked us all in a probable human carcinogen. And now they're out there whining and crying because they're being sued like crazy. And so, over in Vietnam, with the landmark court ruling regarding Monsanto pesticides, the nation of Vietnam now wants Monsanto to pay for the chemical warfare waged by U.S. troops. Because back during Vietnam, Monsanto was saying the same thing. Oh, this Agent Orange, it's harmless, it only affects plants. And the Vietnamese doctors were saying, no, there's all kinds of birth defects, there's all kinds of serious injuries. Apparently, the Agent Orange, which is the most powerful defoliant ever made, was highly toxic. And it included dioxin, which is a very long-lasting toxic ingredient. Now, Monsanto is out there trying to say, well, we didn't intend for that to be in there, it was just a mistake. But it is a very dangerous substance here. Now, I'm sure that what's going to happen is that Monsanto's going to come on back and say, we were in a state of war, and I can't be sued for things we do in a state of war. But Monsanto may actually be in serious trouble, because a lot of people are, first of all, their trust in Monsanto is shattered by this lawsuit. In fact, I think Americans' trust in corporate America as a whole is pretty much shattered. We're being sold shoddy, harmful products in the name of a fast buck. So, apparently a Cheerios weed killer class action lawsuit has been filed against General Mills over their glyphosate ingredient. It's really a mess out there. And glyphosate, like GMO, is something that once it's out in the environment, it's impossible to get back. The damage is done. I don't know how long glyphosate lasts in the environment. But even if we stop using it today, even if it's banned across the globe, it's going to be with us for a while. Now, have you heard the latest propaganda out there trying to dismiss critics of vaccines? The claim is now being made that anybody critical of vaccine safety are really Russian bots because Putin wants disease to spread here in the United States of America, so he's out there sowing distrust of the vaccine injury. I mean, that is pretty much, that's out there. In fact, that's the shark. That is really the shark. Any negative information that corporations and government don't like, oh, it's Russian bots. It's Russian bots causing us trouble. All of those independent media people, they got to be working for Russia. From the world of political correctness, and they made a big deal about this on TV. You remember the animal crackers? We all grew up with them. And the box is supposed to represent a circus train from the days when circuses did travel from town to town with trains, and some of those railroad cars were cages. Single cage, double cage, quadruple cage, and that's what that box is supposed to represent, the railroad car. Well, PETA, which is protesting animals in circuses, basically pushed for Nabisco to change the design. And they did, and the new design basically has the animals fanned out in front, looking out over the veldt, which is okay. I wasn't really attached to the old design. But in this day and age of high-def television, I think maybe, as much as I don't like their meddling in everybody else's life, I think in this case, PETA might have a point. The idea of having a real live animal in an enclosure, in a zoo, it's becoming obsolete, because you can see the same animal on your TV, on any of the nature channels, or virtual reality. So I would be cool with that one here, which doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy the zoos I've gone to during my life. All except for that very first one in New York City. The elephant came on out and scared the heck out of me. I was a little baby. But I remember that. All right, let's talk about what's going on over with the church. Because that Pennsylvania report has ignited a firestorm of concern over this pedophile problem. And at first, Pope Francis wasn't going to say anything about it. Now he's come on out and said that, yeah, this cover-up is the sort of filth one sees in the toilet. Then he followed up saying, to hate is human, to forgive is divine. Okay, but what are you going to do about it? This is something that has gone back decades. And every time it's exposed again, they say, oh, we'll do better. And it doesn't seem to happen. Now, a former Vatican official, former ambassador to the United States, Archbishop Carlo Mario Vigano, has released an affidavit accusing Pope Francis of reinstating Cardinal Theodore McCarrick to a position of prominence despite knowing of McCarrick's sexual abuse of priests, seminarians, and lay people, including minors. And apparently Pope Benedict had imposed canonical sanctions on Cardinal McCarrick in 2009 and 2010, forbidding him from traveling or celebrating Mass in public or participating in public meetings. But Pope Francis later lifted those sanctions and made McCarrick a close personal advisor. So Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano concluded his little 11-page affidavit by calling on Pope Francis to resign as Pope. So this is getting some real serious stuff out there. Now, we've talked a lot about the Tuam. It was actually one of just many places, but it's drawn the focus. And it was this church-operated home for unwed mothers over in Ireland. And it was popularized by a 2013 film, or it was made infamous by a 2013 film called Philomena, which starred Judi Dench as one of the mothers who was trying to relocate the child that was taken from her and put up for adoption. Well, this is going to get a little more attention because now Liam Neeson is making a film about what happened at this place. And right now there's a lot of pressure. Apparently they found the remains of 800 children dumped in a mass grave. And again, how do you look at people who do this sort of thing and say, oh yes, you're the earthly representative of the supreme moral authority? Down in Mexico, Mexican Cardinal Sergio Obeso Rivera, no relation, said abuse victims should be ashamed to accuse men of the church. Really? Really? It doesn't matter what we do to you. You should be ashamed. So I wonder what he has to cover up. No, you shouldn't be ashamed. That's just making you a victim all over again. So we're going to be staying on top of the story. Now, I don't predict that Pope Francis is going to resign, but it is a big stake, and it ought to be, because it has gone on for so long, and it is time for the church to lose its immunity from criticism. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, remember Jack Phillips is out in Colorado, and he's a cake baker decorator. And he refused to do a cake decorating job promoting a same-sex wedding ceremony. The couple sued. The Colorado Civil Rights Commission got involved, and this thing went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, which said that yes, businesses still have a right to refuse to do business with people. And you know, Jack Phillips just said he didn't want to use his creativity and time to promote something he finds morally objectionable. Well, he's now under attack again because a transgender person went into his store, obvious setup, and wants his creative expertise to celebrate transgenderism, which I don't even know how you make the cake. You know, half and half? What's going to be next? Pedophilia? And what is really angering is that these are all the same liberals who insist it's okay for Facebook and Google to filter their content because, after all, they're private companies and not covered by the First Amendment. It's one of the problems with liberalism. They don't really have a consistent, coherent policy or agenda. It's just, I want what I want when I want it, and that's a natural law. Now, story coming out of 12160, and you're not going to believe this one. There's a new safe sex guide for the LGBTQIA community, which refers to the opening on the front of the woman as a front hole, because that's not going to upset the transgenders. So the medically correct terminology has now been declared unusable because it might upset somebody. It might upset somebody in the world. And they're very selective on who they're upsetting. Okay, over in Atlanta, at the neighborhood charter school, their principal, Laura Zelsky, has decided students will no longer recite the Pledge of Allegiance during the school's morning meeting agenda. which she described to parents as an effort to begin our day as a fully inclusive and connected community. And so what this principal is doing is a bunch of teachers and a bunch of students are going to write their own oath to global society. Needless to say, the parents are very, very upset about that. More of this globalism thing here. Now, here's another one. This will probably go to the Supreme Court at one point, but apparently there's a new Florida law, "In God We Trust," must be placed in all public schools. Clearly a First Amendment violation here. But here's another example of where's your concern about offending people now, because not everybody who goes to those schools are Christians. In fact, more and more of them, especially with the refugees and the immigration, they're of other religions. Nobody seems to be concerned that they might be offended by a Christian symbol. This whole political correctness thing is very, very, very arbitrary. Meanwhile, over at the Edinburgh University, students during Welcome Week, the incoming freshmen, are getting gender badges to wear, to say whether they want to be referred to as he, she, they, xi, ku, ba, yu, whatever it is that they want. So now it really is getting ridiculous here. Now, down in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Ebola deaths are spiking, 21% in the last 4 days, and the neighboring countries are on high alert. And what is making this so difficult? First of all, the World Health Organization last Friday said the virus has spread to an area of, quote, high security risk, end quote, meaning a population center, and that because of the ongoing local conflicts where people are moving around a lot, it makes tracking infected people very, very difficult. So this one could turn out to be very, very nasty indeed. Story out of the Daily Mail. And it's basically talking about how more and more synthetic chemicals are being used in what passes for food. And apparently some consumer groups actually tested ice cream for the traditional contents of ice cream, like vanilla, cream, sugar, and egg yolks. And they found 5 brands, one of which even claimed it was classic vanilla ice cream, that didn't have any of those. It was all synthetic chemicals. All right, we're going to be right back. We've got a caller waiting on the line. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go to the phones now, starting with Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you both. And may you have generous buckets of rain, for that matter, for the crops or whatever is growing greenery-wise. I got to hand it to you. You gave me a good laugh this afternoon, for certain. I was like, of all the silly things I could ever hear, and you made a big one today. So, in case you're wondering what I'm talking about, how the outer expression of a genitalia is supposed to look or not look, or how it's supposed to be labeled, dare I say, according to supposedly transgender or transsexual people are concerned. So, my hat's off to you regarding that. In light of that, I thought that the whole idea, I'm hearing this thing about that a gay couple goes in, they sue a baker because they won't do baking for them, or someone who's transgender goes in and, same garbage or whatever is concerned. I'm just trying to figure out one thing. Regardless of what label they get or give them or whatever have you, I thought the whole idea that if someone was transsexual or whatever, and changing sex, either male to female, female to male, whatever the case is, back and forth, like a ping pong ball, I thought the whole idea is that you did what you had to do in order to blend in so you didn't stick out like a sore thumb in society. I thought that was the whole idea behind that.
Well,
I mean, you live your life, sure.
That's how it used to be when the LGBT community wanted acceptance, and they wanted to come on out with this, we're really just like you. And that worked. You know, people were very open and accepting about what's going on. But now it's transitioned into this very militant, in-your-face, you know, by golly, you got to accept me, you know, the way I am, no matter how absurd I may behave. And see, to me, if I walked into a bakery and I wanted a custom cake and the baker said, I really don't feel comfortable doing that, I'd say, okay, do you know somebody who would? And I would just take my business over to them. But when we hear that yet again, this transgender has gone into this same guy's place of business, you know, he's obviously under attack. And that kind of militant LGBTQ, I think, is going to backfire on them.
That's just ill-mannered, but by the same token, that would be the same thing as saying, well, regardless of what the religious background of the baker is, the cook is, say a Buddhist were to go in there and request a cake to be done for them, or even better yet, a Satanist were to go in and say, I want a cake to be done. What's the baker going to do? Refuse them? Be sued by them? I mean, even a Buddhist has higher standards than that. But for someone who's a Satanist or whatever, in total opposite end of the spectrum of what the baker probably is, given the nature of the country, so to speak, as it were, I'm just finding this whole thing hilarious. It's like, well, you know, if you know that the baker won't do it, then find someone else that will. It's not like you don't have access to an internet. It's not like you don't have access to a local phone book.
Yep.
You know, and look up somebody. So stop showing your in public and basically showing your ignorance. If you're supposed to be so highly intelligent for someone who's changing sex, then start behaving like that. Okay, enough out of me. Later.
All right, later. I mean, you know, I've seen a lot of places, small businesses, where right there on the wall, there's a framed sign that says, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. And apparently the Supreme Court agreed, saying that this baker didn't have to make this cake because of his beliefs. But now they're back at him again. All right, let's see. Another caller on the line, Mike in Long Island. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I have to thank you for what you do. You're incredible. What really happened is incredible. RBN is incredible. It's just I'm speechless with this whole thing. How far we've fallen is just it's remarkable. I don't know where to begin. It's so sad that you can't even be proud to be an American. I guess I don't even know where to begin.
It's getting hard. Well, the fabric of our society is coming apart. Whether it's political correctness or too much victimology, or we're all being drugged into borderline insanity. But something has gone horribly wrong with this country. There's absolutely no question about it. When I was a kid, people didn't behave this way.
I know. I'm a little younger than you, and I agree. It's just what happened. Political correctness is really a disease or whatever you want to call it. It's just horrible. Horrible.
Well, it's an attempt to trick us into self-censorship because the ultimate goal here from the liberals and the corporate media is to go back to a world where they will tell us what they want us to think and we will keep our mouths shut. And that's a big part of what political correctness was about, that you shouldn't express an opinion because it might offend somebody.
Right, and it's Republican or Democrat or whatever. There's got to be something new. I think someone to wake up and say, "This person's a smart person. He's a PhD, a doctor, or whatever. Let's give this guy a chance instead of a popularity vote." You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
All right. right, Mike. Keep up the great work. You're awesome.
All right. Well, I'll do
That's all
my
I can
best
say,
here.
Mike.
We're going to take another phone call. Bob in Colorado. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you too, Michael. Listen, talking about this bakery and so forth, what I don't understand, and I do understand it just like you do, but there is an agenda behind it. I'm a retired police officer. Cops always hung together. Firemen, they always hung together. Those people, they hang together. I don't know why it's so hard for these people to not just go to their own bakeries. I mean, they have their own, I'm sure, transgender or gay or whatever it is, bakeries somewhere around. They should support each other if they're so loving and they really want to really blend in with society instead of bashing people because they really don't think the way they do. And that's really all I wanted to say. It's why don't they help out their own? That's all. Quit bashing us who want to do it some different way. That's all. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. What's going on here is they want to reclaim the victimology card. They want to be seen as victims. They want to be seen as being justified at being offended. And they're going on out with these provocations, which is exactly what this is. The fact that they went back to this exact same baker with the exact same request, knowing he was going to refuse, knowing the Supreme Court backed him up, it's a provocation. And as I said, this transition from LGBTQ wanting to be accepted, which is working, to this in-your-face, you have to change to accommodate me, that will backfire. The optics on it are really, really terrible. Okay, the phone lines are empty. We're going to go back here. And interesting little story. This was in The Guardian, and it's a flashback story to 2008, where apparently the chief prison guard of the jail where McCain was being kept is saying, no, he was never tortured. He was badly injured from the airplane crash, but he said, on the contrary, we saved his life, curing him with extremely valuable medicines that at times were not available to our own wounded. And he said they took really good care of him because as the son of an admiral, they realized what a propaganda asset he was going to be. So apparently in this interview with the Italian daily Corriere della Sera, Nguyen Tien Tran acknowledged that conditions in the prison were tough but not inhuman. And he insists that McCain was never actually tortured. Google is apparently back with their hands on all the plugs there. And Google has taken down 39 YouTube channels on the claim that they were somehow linked to Iran and part of a covert Iranian-backed operation to spread propaganda to U.S. viewers. And 49 others were part of a Russian-backed operation to spread disinfo. And by golly, that's the corporate media's job. Nobody's going to take that away from us. So I'm in agreement with that other caller that we just had. I've never seen it this bad. Wednesday, I'm going to be 66 years old. I've never seen this country this bad. With all the factionalization, the just wacky thinking, this focus on trivial areas to the ignorance of what's going on in other parts of the... hang on just a second, I got a tech issue I got to deal with. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. Okay, there we are. People are they're obsessed with selfies. They're totally vain, self-absorbed, and we've lost our focus. We've lost our focus on what this nation should be about. And it's deliberate and it's engineered And that's also part of the mission of the corporate media, to keep us all looking over here and be dazzled and, have the right makeup on and the right fashions on and wear the current colors and just keep us all, absorbed with that. So we're not paying attention to what's happening in the back. Because there's a lot of things happening in the back that we need to be paying attention to. There really is. All right, so getting on out here. Mark Dice is out there with a new video saying fake news, it's getting worse. And yes, it is. It's a propaganda war. It is a propaganda war. And in a way, all of this deplatforming has vindicated Alex Jones for the motto for InfoWars. There's a war on for your mind. And it absolutely is. They want to control what you're thinking because they don't like that you're not thinking the way they want you to think. Remember what I said about Sun Tzu and the art of war? For a ruler to have a successful war, they need three things. They need a military that believes in the moral rightness of the war so that they will fight hard and if necessary die to win that war. The ruler also needs a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of the war so they will bear the hardships war brings even to the victorious side. The United States has neither of those. People in the military know what these wars are all about. It's just aggression, conquest of resources. Okay, let's try this. Yeah, apparently my YouTube feed is... okay, we'll do this better. Part of what I'm going to do the end of the week when Claire and I are taking time off is I'm going to come in here and just reorganize this entire audio setup because it's overdue. So where was I? We were talking about going to war with a population that doubts the war is noble or legitimate, going to war with a military that doesn't believe in its necessity. And I think that's where we are, and it's one of the many reasons why I keep saying, I don't think the United States can win this war. I mean, they've invested huge amounts of money in these high-tech whiz-bang weapons, most of which don't seem to work very well, and they're all very expensive to own and very expensive to maintain. And wars are ultimately about money. The side that runs out of wealth first is the side that loses. This is a big mistake, getting into this war. All right, let's take a phone call. Ryan in Cleveland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
On the 15th, I got two things. This is one, I'm just going to tell you what I've been doing, which nobody's been able to recant or deny, or they've just been stunned, which is I talked to some liberal people I know, I'll say, is I asked them, I go, how many times has Trump run for office? And all of them say once. I said, well, listen to this in the newspaper about racial division. It says, though Trump has been long unpopular with the black voters. And then I says, what does that mean? He's only run once. You just said that. And they're like, they're just stunned. I said, that's just racial division there, trying to make it look like the blacks have hated Trump forever, the black voters. And none of them have denied it or argued back. It's like they're flabbergasted. They can't believe it. And that's right in the front page of 8/15/18 USA Today. So I just thought I'd tell you that. I found that to be pretty interesting. And the other thing is, with Iran taking over that little strait in the Gulf, or whatever you want to call it.
The Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry. What's your take on that, with them saying that they've taken control of it, and that the United States tries to stop their oil from coming through, that they're going to do the same thing? You think it's a bluff? You think it's real? Or what's your take on it? I'm pretty interested in hearing from you.
Iran had to do something. I mean, they're being beaten up by the United States, and at some point you say, I'm just not going to deal with this anymore. But apparently what Iran is saying is that they are in charge of security in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, and there is no reason for any foreign ships to be there, which is a dig at the United States. And Iran has already announced that all friendly and neutral nations will have unrestricted access to those waterways. And that's where it sits. Now, China supposedly is supporting Iran in this move. I don't know if that support includes actual military hardware, but Iran needs to get some other people in there with some ships because they really don't have what they need to stand up to the United States Navy unless somebody comes on in and helps them solve that.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. You have a great day. Thanks.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And we're going to take another commercial break. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. And I just got an interesting email I want to share with you. Many years ago, when my youngest was turning 5, I went to a bakery shop that had newly opened in the town where we lived to get her a birthday cake, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles themed. The owner politely refused, as he explained they wanted to get a reputation as a bakery shop that catered to higher-end clients, wedding cakes, big parties, that kind of thing. I simply went to our grocery store where they had a small bakery and had no difficulty. I wasn't upset. Mind you, the first bakery shop I went to went under in less than 2 years, but I simply took it as, hey, that's their choice. I just don't get this. And I don't either. You know, this confrontational approach to baked goods, I don't know what they think they're trying to accomplish. It's not building sympathy for the LGBT community to behave like this. And again, you find another baker. There's lots of them around. It really is ridiculous. Okay, so over in Germany, they're having major riots. Apparently, in the German city of Chemnitz, there was a knife killing committed by a Syrian and an Iraqi of a local man who was stabbed to death by these migrants, and it just sparked these riots and these vigilante race hate mobs who want to hunt down the foreigners. So this open borders refugee situation is rapidly reaching a breaking point, and it is going to break into open conflict in the streets of Europe, and that's not going to be good for anybody. And this is all because George Soros had this dream of a one world government and a one world central bank, and we were just going to have all kinds of good things happening there. And everybody would stand around and sing Kumbaya and hug and hug and hug. Okay. Snow is now falling in Germany and Austria. Ski season is about to start. And wow, it's still August. So much for all the corporate media lately saying, oh, it's been a broiler of a year, hottest year on record. They keep saying that every summer, and then every winter we get it harder and harder and harder. Winter. And I believe I said earlier this year, it's going to be an early onset, and it's going to be a rough one here. Getting on back to the immigration situation, this is a bizarre story. There's a migrant in Germany with 542 criminal investigations against him. They can't deport him because the authorities can't figure out where he's from. I can imagine a DNA test may give you the heads up on that. But the world has just gone bonkers, and I'm sorry, but I've never seen this country this bad. And it's kind of sorry to see. It's like watching a loved one wither away from an incurable illness. All right, time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Take what you learn here and share it with everybody that you know. In particular, please keep talking about how the social media corporations are trying to silence conservative voices. It is censorship. Come to the United States of America, and we have to work together to get around it. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.